Welcome to today's webinar. As a global consulting firm, Protiviti is here to help you connect, grow, succeed. We invite you to visit us online at protiviti.com/webinars to find other great content and subscribe. Now, let's begin.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. We're going to be talking about securing the future, M365 Copilot, data security, readiness, and adoption. Before we get started, I just want to call out a few quick reminders. Edge and Chrome are the recommended browsers today. If you're having any issues, please try rejoining on one of those. If you continue to have issues, you'll see a Q&A box on your screen. Reach out to us through that and we will help to troubleshoot. Also, please continue to use that Q&A box throughout the webinar, and you can submit questions to our speakers. Time permitting, we'll get to a couple of those. If not, we'll reach out after the webinar. And then last reminder is that everybody will be receiving the recording of today's session following the webinar, as well as some additional resources. And then with that, I'm going to pass it off to our panelists. You'll have access to all of their bios on your screen. And we'll start with our moderator for today, Patrick Anderson. Over to you.
Very much, Mackenzie. Patrick Anderson with Protiviti, Managing Director out of our Microsoft practice. Wonderful to meet you all. Antonio.
I'll continue next. Antonio Mayo, also Managing Director with Protiviti as part of our Microsoft Solutions practice. Also a Microsoft MVP. I've been part of the MVP program for 13 years and very happy to be here.
Antonio Amon.
Hey everyone, I'm a product manager within Microsoft, specifically looking after M365 Copilot, and part of a team I belong to is within engineering, is partner incubation, helping partners be successful with their Copilot journey.
Thank you, Stefan.
Morning, everyone. So, Stefan, I'm a compliance specialist for Canada, working for Microsoft. I've been doing that for almost 20 years, and discussing and helping today our customers to adopt much more easily Copilot in their environment.
Very good. Thank you, Stefan. Tyler.
Hi, I'm Tyler with Hilton. Been with Hilton for a little over 10 years now. I am Hilton's architect for the Microsoft 365 platform.
Very much, Tyler. We will just jump straight into questions then. So we have some pre-canned questions. I see that there are already, when people were registering, some questions came in. We've tried to incorporate some of those, as well as I'm seeing questions come in. Feel free to add questions. We will get to them as we can. But I'll kick it off with first question to you, Stefan. Can you share what trends you're observing in Copilot rollout and how customers are preparing for it?
Yeah, sure. So, of course, as you have may seen over the past month, there are more and more customers and people talking about Copilot, and it's an amazing tool. So customers are really enjoying the deployment of such solutions because it's a gain of productivity. It helps users every day in every request. I mean, even daily, I'm using Copilot for everything. And when we discuss with customer, the first consideration they have, the first question they have is more about, oh, I just understood that Copilot can access almost everything the user get access to. But mainly, we know for sure that customers were not aware users were not aware that they get access to such information. So now customers are more working on how to ensure that their users will get access to only the information they should get access to. Because, you know, when you ask a question to Copilot, you get access to everything you get access to, even sometimes very sensitive information. And if you do not have any data governance, or it's ongoing, or just for specific information, you might be in trouble because that means potentially user will be able to access the sensitive contents. So now users are more working on the, not security around Copilot, but working on the data governance to ensure that Copilot will get access to what's really useful for the user and what's not very sensitive.
Good, appreciate that. Aman, over to you. Are there any key blockers that you're seeing when it comes to Copilot adoption?
From my vantage point, looking at worldwide customers and partners and interacting with them, there are two key blockers that I observe. The first one, of course, is the security and compliance, and becoming one of the key blockers for adopting Copilot, because organizations are concerned about users getting access to information and data, or data leakage that users should not get access to. So that is one of the key blockers. And so it is very important for organizations to understand and work with their IT and, of course, partners like yourselves to ensure that their security and compliance posture is up to date and correct for leveraging Copilot. The second one that we are seeing is customers not realizing the importance of change management. When it comes to Copilot, because change management is one of the key sort of tenets to ensure that users understand and go through this change that Copilot is going to bring about in their flow of work and how they interact with technology. And within modern workspace, M365 Exchange, M365 apps, etc., there was no change management needed within this productivity sphere. And so it is important that customers also understand the importance of change management and how they need to really transform. This technology transforms the way users work and interact with technology, and the change management that is needed to ensure this behavioral change happens. So, yeah.
Yeah, Aman, I'll add on to that we at Protiviti have done hundreds of these, and that is the differentiating factor is change management, not change management like we used to do in IT, which is a well-timed email, but rather true change management. We would bring in ProSci certified change management specialists to move from usage to actual adoption. Tyler, I'm going to move over to you. Could you walk us through, it's three-part question, so I'm going to ask them one portion at a time for you. Could you walk us through the Copilot deployment at Hilton?
Yeah, so at Hilton, from a Copilot with enterprise data protection perspective, we've obviously had that deployed to all of our users. We jumped on that one pretty quick with the chat GPT thing because we had a lot of users out there using chat GPT. So we rolled that one out to try to get some protection because we didn't want, obviously, our corporate data to be training the LLMs. So quickly that moved into us looking into Copilot for Microsoft 365. We just finished our pilot program with the EAP and are about to go production, I think, in January with it outside of the EAP, where we're going to start allowing others outside of the 300 that were in that to participate. As well as start charging the the licensing back to the teams. So that's where we are at this point. So come January, we should be starting to go production and see a little bit more of an uptick.
Very good. And what motivated the decision to roll out Copilot in the first place, and how did you prepare?
Well, as I said, the people going out and using the public solutions like ChatGPT was the big driver for that. But also the 365 Copilot gives you a lot more capabilities. Like you can use it to draft, you can use it to summarize. So we were really interested in that because it gives our users a lot more tools to be productive in their day-to-day life. So we wanted to get on the EAP program to give it a go and kick the tires on it, if you will. And so we've been working on it for the past year or so, going through all the different capabilities it has, how we can control it, how we can audit it, things of that nature. And so what we did to initially prepare for it is we started to look at over-permissioning, because that's been most people that I've talked to's biggest problem is over-permissioning within SharePoint and OneDrive. Luckily, typically we kind of slow step into things. We slow step into OneDrive, slow step into SharePoint. All the different features within 365 were rolled out slowly. So that kind of benefited us because we had a lot of the governance already in place for a lot of these pieces, but we still had some concerns over permissioning because we've never done a full audit of the environment of all this stuff. So what we did to kind of help mitigate those concerns is we first did a pass over all of the the sites within SharePoint to see site level permissions and access. So we looked at all of our portal sites, the team sites associated with Microsoft Teams, et cetera, to kind of get an idea of who had permissions from that level. We actually were pretty impressed with the permissions from that level. We did a pretty good job. All of our portal pages were being managed by group membership. The membership of those groups were being maintained by our identity management system. Most of the individual team sites out of the company portals were all being managed by group memberships. Some of those were even automated. So from the first pass, we were looking pretty good there. Then we decided to do a scan of sharing within OneDrive and SharePoint, and our confidence started to dwindle a little bit. There was a lot out there. Microsoft makes it extremely easy to share, which is great for collaboration, but from security, it's chaos. So we started to drill into those, and we have our default sharing type set to specific people. So you have to define who you want to share it with. Did that on purpose so that you would have to think about it before you shared. Well, I would say over half of our users changed that to people in your organization. So we had a ton of org links out there, and it really gave us a lot of concern because of the sheer number of them. But we worked with Microsoft on a lot of this stuff, did a lot of testing, and really that concern was somewhat mitigated as well. And the reason is those links don't actually give people permissions to things. They just give them the capability of having permissions, which is an important fact. All it does is say anybody in our company can access this if they have the link. So because of the way that that works, unless they've actually clicked on the link, not just been given the link, but clicked on the link, it is not, they don't have permissions on the data. And so Copilot doesn't actually return anything from that link or any search method really. So that is great. And another piece on that is once you've clicked the link, it actually puts your permissions directly on the object and associates those permissions with that sharing link. So as the user, you can actually see who has actively clicked the link and which link they clicked to get the permissions, and know, well, they shouldn't have it, and you can work on revoking that. So what we ended up doing, and I think I'm actually getting to your next question. Nope, I'm not quite there yet, actually. So what we ended up actually doing is we decided that we were going to require the participants for the EAP to generate and review sharing reports for their OneDrive as well as any SharePoint sites they were an owner of. We did run into some issues with this particular requirement. One was generating a sharing report for OneDrive is totally different than generating one for a SharePoint site. So they had to know two different ways of generating the report. And then once they've generated the report, there was no way to bulk clean up any of those things. So like we've been out in OneDrive and SharePoint since 2018. So there were thousands and thousands of sharing links out there for even one person. So cleaning up all those individually, they're just not going to do it. So that was a problem we ran into with that. Well, what we ended up doing is creating a very basic PowerShell script that uses Graph API to generate a report almost exactly like the one generated by Microsoft, but you basically only needed to know the URL for the site you wanted to generate the report for. So you put this URL in there, you authenticate using delegated permissions, and it creates a report for you. It doesn't matter if it's OneDrive, SharePoint, it'll just kick it out for you. On top of that, to solve the bulk cleanup problem, we actually added into that same script the capability of reading back in that report and doing bulk cleanups of the sharing links and permissions that were on these all these documents out there. So basically all the user had to do was run the script, create the report, look through the report and see what they wanted to clean up, and then run it again and clean up all the links. So it made it pretty simple for them to go through, generate these reports, and clean up after themselves. So that's basically where we're at right now with that.
Very good. I'm going to move slightly into adoption. So when you originally got it in the EAP, in the early adoption program, who did you roll it out to? And what are you seeing now that?
Yeah, so we rolled it out to several different departments globally. The people that were chosen by executive committee, collaboration champions, so on. So we went out and reached out for nominees for it, and then depending on how many we got from each section would determine how many of those might get it, and some of them got put on a wait list. And so also during the EAP, we would review, surveys and reporting to see what people were getting out of Copilot. If they weren't getting things out of it or weren't using it, we would engage with them to see if maybe it was a training problem or if Copilot just wasn't working for them. And if it ended up being it wasn't working for them, we would end up transitioning their license to another person on the waiting list to give others an opportunity to, provide input to Copilot. And actually, because of this, we had the highest adoption of Copilot in the EAP, and it was 87% of our users were satisfied with it. And actually, our satisfaction ratings were 4 out of 5. So we got pretty good results from the EAP, and I feel like most of it was because of the very hands-on engagement that we did with the participants.
Appreciate that, Tyler. Thanks for telling us the story to Hilton. Antonio, I'm going to lean on you because I know that you do these a lot with a lot of different clients. So based on your experience with other clients, what trends or common strategies are you seeing?
So it's a good question. So in terms of trends, our clients know that data protection is important, to some of the points that Tyler raised. Dealing with that, it's important to deal with how you're securing and sharing your data as kind of preparation for AI. They know that's important, but they don't really want to wait for that to be done in order to take advantage of Copilot. So we see them really leaning on trying to balance this notion of data protection and preparing for Copilot and actually getting it into people's hands so they can see some benefit from AI. But achieving that balance really between that is kind of the real trick here, I think, because you can spend a lot of time preparing your environment and dealing with oversharing, and that is important to do. But at the same time, you want to make sure you're realizing those benefits from AI. They're also trying to figure out who are the right roles to start with in rolling it out. A lot of the push for AI and for solutions like Copilot really came from the executive level, from the C-suite. But we really see the roles that they're considering are they're not roles in terms of different departments. They're more roles of managers versus individual contributors. So they're trying to figure out who are the right people to roll it to first. And it tends to be kind of that middle management layer that they start with. Individual contributors that are information workers as well. And then they're trying also to assess the benefits that they're gaining from it. And I think people started originally to assess the benefits on kind of what kind of time savings are we going to get from individual tasks. And it's less about that. It's more about when I look at a business process and I look at, people using that business process through several instances, how much time and effort am I saving overall by using a solution like Copilot to help me get things done faster, to help me get some more of something done? So for example, I have a conference I have to organize next week, and I need a full slate of speakers and topics for a day. I can use a solution like Copilot to help me actually set that up, to help me write some of that content in a very professional way. And overall, that might save me 8 hours. That's kind of how we're judging some of the time savings and benefits versus individual tasks. So those are some of the trends that we're seeing from our clients. And from an adoption strategy, getting it into people's hands and helping to support people through that adoption process, because Patrick, I think you said earlier, I'm trying to remember how you phrased it, moving from, having people use it to having people really adopt it. That's kind of a focus area for our clients. How do we make that really happen for people so that they're feeling the benefits? And when they have a task they need to do or a business process they need to go through, they kind of think to go to Copilot as a tool to help them get that done faster and better, perhaps.
Yeah, appreciate that. Stefan, I'm going to move back over to you. Have you seen zero trust capabilities be a significant driver in AI solution implementation?
More and more. To reuse one of the point that Antonio just talked about, we need to identify who's getting access to what. So the what we can define that purview is here to assist, of course, but then we need to identify the user and how he's going to use the information. So we need to ensure a proper identification process. So we need to ensure that the user is able to access the content, and after that, what's going to happen with this content. So we need to clearly identify users' access to the information, because as a reminder, Copilot will reuse the user permissions on documents. Copilot is not going to provide access to everything. It's going to reuse user permissions. So we need to ensure that the permissions is okay, but also that we have clearly identified who can access to what. So this is very strategic. Also, we have a lot of customers using multiple generative AI engines. So we also need to ensure that we identify which user can use which engine, because sometimes it's not only about Copilot. Of course, Copilot is perfect for your day-to-day activities. I mean, no questions about the productivity help here. But sometimes for medical aspects or for industrial aspects, like soldering and so on, they need to get access to different engines. So we need to ensure that the correct information is shared on the correct platform. This is what we called earlier shadow data. And to ensure shadow data, we need to have a proper identification of the user, platform, permissions, sensitive informations, and so on. So it's very strategic.
Follow-on question to that. Many customers are transitioning from ChatGPT to Copilot. I think we've talked about it at Hilton. You slightly touched on it on the different LLMs underneath. What are the challenges they face during this transition, and what security concerns might need to be addressed?
So it's very different. I mean, in a sense that if you wanted to use ChatGPT, you need to use the website. So it's pretty easy, or their own application. So it's pretty easy to prevent the application or content to be shared to this external application. So no questions about that. Now talking about the capabilities, and Aman will be way better than me to discuss about that, but you find out ChatGPT's capabilities within Copilot for sure. No questions asked. But the challenge after that is now we need to ensure that every interaction user will have with Copilot will remain compliant. So by defining compliance, again, it's about getting the right access to the correct information. And this is very strategic, because difference is with Copilot, you can ask anything everywhere. That means if you would like to look for something within Teams or Word documents, asking for summary, asking something across your whole corporation, your whole enterprise to get a feedback or summary, or get like crumbs of sensitive information and so on, you can do that with Copilots. So this is different approach. Gen AI engines are out there available for multiple purposes. With Copilot, you get them, plus you get the access to all the information within the company. And I think this is where it is very strategic. You need to ensure that, again, user get access to the correct information at the correct time. And Copilot can help you for that. But of course, you need to ensure that if it's confidential, it will remain confidential. Meaning, if you're performing a request in which you would like to get a summary of a specific project, and because there was no data governance, you get access to very sensitive information, which has been, for example, classified as confidential. We need to ensure that the summary will remain confidential. This is strategic. It's not because it's summary that it has no importance. It has the same value in terms of sensitivity than the source documents. So the challenge here is in offering more capabilities over ChatGPT. We also creating more challenges for the adoption for customers. And as Antonio said earlier, it's also based on multiple aspects of the project and business interactions. So we need to ensure that we are able to understand that to help the customer to understand that also.
Very good. I'm going to move over to you, Antonio, and Stefan, by all means, add your color here as well. But I'm very excited about a lot of the announcements that came out of Ignite. In fact, one of the questions that was submitted from Ravi, I think this will be covered on this particular question, but what came out of Ignite that impacts approaches around protecting your data in preparation for Copilot?
So piggyback a little bit of what Stefan said. There were actually some really great announcements coming out of Microsoft Ignite. Patrick, you and I were there at Ignite. I think some other folks from the call here were there also. Hopefully some of our audience members were there as well. It was a really great conference. It was great to be back at Ignite. One of the key announcements coming out of it is that SharePoint Advanced Management, or SAM, licensing is now included with Copilot licensing. So SAM, or SharePoint Advanced Management, provides a few great capabilities to help you secure your data in preparation for AI solutions like Copilot. And previously, you had to buy additional licensing for SAM. But now, if you buy Copilot licensing, you get SAM licensing with it, which is awesome. And a few of the great capabilities that are showing up in SAM as well to help with that, some of the new capabilities there are things like restricted content discovery. So you can now specify specific sites that Copilot will not pull content from as part of creating summaries and creating capabilities without breaking other search experiences, which is an important point around that. So I can specify specific sites that have really sensitive data from our organization that I don't want to show up in Copilot. And it'll still allow things like DLP and other search-related experience to work on those sites, but Copilot won't read any content from that site. So that's one great capability coming out of SAM that you now get with your Copilot licensing. Another one is to specify certain sensitivity labels where if content is labeled with that label, that won't show up in Copilot as well. So another nice SAM capability. Stefan, something that you talked a little bit about, and I'd love your thoughts on this. We saw that AI Hub within Purview has now been renamed to, so it's gone GA, and it's been renamed to Data Security Posture Management for AI. So a long name, and we like to say DPSM for AI. That is a great tool that's now available for people to be able to see which generative AI solutions are people using in my organization, right? Are people using ChatGPT still, even though we've said, please don't use it, use Copilot instead. You can enforce policies on how people use that. And it comes with its own oversharing report as well. SAM has an oversharing report. In the SharePoint admin, there's a site level permissions report. DPSM for AI now has its own sharing report. And then there's also Microsoft Graph Data Connect as a fourth one. So Stefan, interested in your thoughts on what came out of AI and kind of how that helps the previous stuff you were talking about.
Well, yeah, you're right. For us, meaning the Copilot and Purview interaction, there were a lot of announcements at Ignite. There was also a lot of things which were released just before, but perhaps less known by customers. And like, as you said, label inheritance. As soon as you consult something which is confidential, by default, the result will be also confidential, which is, I think, one of the strategic key. As you said, also, to the way we can create DLP policies to prevent copilots to access sensitive content, whether they're classified or not, which is also a step forward, the adoption of Gen AI. Now, the SPM for AI, it's a long name, I agree, but this is also a strategy, and there's a reason why we call that DSPM for AI. We will have a DSPM engine also, so which will be more generic, meaning getting signals coming from Purview and SAM and other features, but more to come also. It's an ongoing project. DSPM for AI, the main purpose is to help the customers understand how Gen AI are used by their users. So we identify the thousands of Gen AI engines that exist over the market, because there are lots. And then we can identify which kind of information has been shared across those Gen AI engines, which is very interesting and very important, because sometimes you might be able to understand that customers are sharing sensitive information on the wrong Gen AI engine. So DSPM4 AI is here to let the customers understand at first what kind of information are shared over those Gen AI engines, whether it's Copilot or any other engine on the markets, where they're classified or not. And on top of that, we also have the capability to have DLP rules, meaning preventing such sharing over those engines. This way, you can say such information could be shared on Copilot, and such information could be shared on my own ChatGPT instance I've created somewhere, because I have my own LLM, and I want to be sure that specific users can access them. But you want also to be sure that, again, no shadow data, meaning the correct information is shared against the correct engine. So DSPM4 AI is here to help customers to being more focused on this AI, on Gen AI trend, and ensure they can also deploy specific policies just to ensure that usage is correct and meet actually the expectation of the company.
Very good. Appreciate that perspective. Follow-on question for you, Aman. From an adoption perspective, because I know you're an expert in that particular area, how do you balance empowering users to leverage Gen AI solutions while ensuring robust security measures are in place?
So it's a great question. I think it's top of mind for a lot of our customers from what I'm hearing as well. And look, adoption and security and compliance are not mutually exclusive. They are very much hand in hand, specifically when we talk about Copilot, M365 Copilot, and access to it. If organizations and users would not trust that they will not have the right security or compliance, and a concern about data leakage or compliance issues, access to wrong information, etc., they would not use the technology. So they are very much working together. So any robust security posture is really important to ensure organizations and users trust that there isn't going to be any data leakage or any security risks in relationship to the data. So I would say that any adoption and change management program should include education and training the users around capabilities and limitations of Gen AI. This would include, of course, leveraging Gen AI tools securely and responsibly. I would say, in fact, take an example, right? Consider users creating a document or a data asset within the organization, ensuring that they understand the right policies and labels to apply to those documents, something that we actually do within our company. Even when we create data assets within Microsoft, we are prompted and we are trained on leveraging the right security posture or labeling so that the information is not available or not inadvertently made available to folks who are not supposed to see that information. So ensuring that this is part of the change management program itself and part of the change management, and ensuring that, and the last thing I would say actually is security is not just an IT problem. It is the responsibility of every user. So ensuring that users understand the necessity and the importance of it as they are leveraging Copilot, and ensuring that they use the tool properly. So that's what I would say in terms of balancing the compliance with the adoption. They just are hand in hand.
Appreciate that, Aman. So this one's going to go out to the whole group, and I'd like to start with you, Tyler. We've not heard from you in a little while, but what positive outcomes are you seeing from implementing these security measures? What risks, pitfalls is this helping customers avoid?
Yeah, so I mean, the biggest thing we had to do from a Copilot rollout perspective was get people to understand, how to evaluate who has access to the data that they own, how they can review the access, and the different, risks associated with different types of sharing. Now, we don't allow anyone links at Hilton, but we do obviously allow the entire org ones. Can't disable those anyway. But what we're seeing benefit-wise is people are becoming more aware of the data they have, how they're sharing it, and who has access to it.
Anyone else want to add on to that?
I mean, I would second what Tyler has said. Like, as I was talking in my previous response as well, importance of users understanding the need of applying the right security labels, sensitivity labels, taking responsibility of the data assets that they are creating within the IT estate of an organization. I think people are realizing, organizations are realizing the importance of this, and they are rolling this out and making sure the users understand the need so that they can use the technology like Copilot, correctly within the company without the risk, without the erosion of trust of data leakage and data becoming accessible to people who should not have access to it. So I definitely second that.
Patrick, I would also say that these data security and data governance measures that we're putting in place are things that we should be doing anyway, right? Regardless of Copilot. And I think the benefits that people are seeing from AI and from solutions like Copilot is reigniting the need to implement these measures. It allows us to have better visibility on the data that we have. It allows us to better control it, to better govern it. It also helps us to save costs as well, because one of the security measures that we do recommend to clients is you manage the life cycle of data effectively, that you actually dispose and delete data when you no longer need it. And I think that's a real trend that we're also seeing where, traditionally in the past, often our legal teams wanted to keep everything forever. They're now seeing risks around doing that, risks to data being exposed to AI solutions that shouldn't be, because maybe it's out of date. Risks to data being exposed to data discovery and litigation when it doesn't need to be because you were permitted to delete it previously. And then also the costs of storage, right? We see organizations that have been amassing large amounts of data for long periods of time. And we used to say storage is cheap, but storage is not cheap in the cloud. So as more and more of that data amasses, our costs increase. So this reigniting of the discussion around data security, data governance, managing data lifecycle effectively is helping us to deal with all of those situations, including reducing cost of storing data. And it really does make a solution like Copilot for Microsoft 365 more effective because you're dealing with the most relevant data to you and your role and the data that you're permitted to have access to. So I think you can better trust the results once that data is cleaned up and you're able to really rely on it.
I think it's also like a shock for customers. Such adoptions and enlightened that fact they were not managing the information, whatever the information was, whether it was in Teams, in emails, in SharePoint, OneDrive, whatever. So there was this way of thinking like 20 years ago when you have your on-premise infrastructure, you were okay because, well, only internals could get access. Then a lot of customers, I would say all customers, are using clouds, whatever the adoption is, but they're using clouds and they forgot that they need to keep control of the assets. And with such disruptive solution as Copilot, meaning in the product environment, it's a revolution. Like it's like if you had like 100 people working for you. And just imagine that you have these 100 people getting access to everything if you have no data governance. So it's like a shock for the enterprise saying, oh, that's very interesting. How can they get access to that? And as Tyler said earlier, they need to run some kind of discovery of the sensitive information across SharePoint and OneDrive. And it was a shock. And that's it. So it helps, as also say, non-tenure because they don't have any choice now, but they need to keep control of the assets and restrict the assets to understand how they are shared outside of the company. The oversharing reports exist for some reasons, because data is living, and we all have the habit to create version 1, version 2, version 3, and so on and so on. And at the end, we just keep the final versions. But what about the 30 previous versions? who's going to delete them, who get access to them? And that's a real question. That's why also I think Copilot is some kind of a maturity hub for customers. It helps them to understand, okay, for the adoption, we need to ensure that we get control over our assets. And that's an interesting activity. It's not like a game, but now they have a challenge on which they have to work, which is I need to combine productivity and security. And this has been said for many years now, even decades, but this is clearly nowadays touched by the user environment, the result of such idioms. We need to ensure users can work while IT is protecting the business assets and focusing on business assets.
I appreciate that. Thank you, everybody. I'm going to move more into compliance now. And I'm going to address this one back to you, Antonio and Stefan, again. Once you've addressed the sensitive data concerns in preparation for Copilot, how do you promote continued compliance and data protection on an ongoing basis? I mean, all these reports that we've already talked about, they're run once, but people continue to share while you're mitigating that.
Stefan, did you want to go first?
Please, Antonio.
So I would say, Patrick, when we do roll out, let's say, remediation efforts for oversharing and permissions, it's often part of a larger data protection program, right? Because it's not usually just the oversharing and permissions issues you want to address. Tyler, very much, appreciate what you said about dealing with that as kind of an initial precursor to rolling out Copilot. Very important step. We're often doing these as part of larger data protection programs. And as part of that, we certainly educate the compliance team, the data protection team, on kind of that notion that you mentioned, Patrick, of ongoing compliance, ongoing security of the solutions. There are a number of reports built into Microsoft 365 and Purview to continue to view that, right? The Data Explorer, for example, is a great tool. Was called the Content Explorer, now called the Data Explorer in Microsoft Purview for seeing where people are storing sensitive data. But we also assist in developing new reports, pulling data on a regular basis, and just making sure that there's a regular cadence of reviewing who has access to what and what security measures are in place and who's sharing what and what's happening. So that tends to be a mix of built-in reports, the data explorers, sometimes custom reports, sometimes access reviews, so making sure people stay on top of their, the sites that they own, the teams that they own, and the permissions that are there on some sort of regular basis every 3-6 months, so that you kind of instill a notion of data protection in everybody's job, right? Data protection, information protection should be part of everyone's job in an organization. So part of rolling out such a program, there's often a lot of education around that, around what are people's responsibilities, why should you care, right? Why is this important to the organization? Why should this be important to you? How is this helping you do your job more effectively? As you roll out those controls, you do need to have a strong change management and communication program around that, so people continue to do it on an ongoing basis. Stefan, anything you'd add to that?
Yeah, as you said, we have multiple reports, dashboards, solutions. We can apply encryption, restrict access to Copilot on SharePoint, and so on. So we have a lot of technical tools, and I'm happy we have them because we can help customers to ensure they can keep control over their assets. Not all over the technical capabilities, and we can have a long webinar just around capabilities, but what's very important for customers to understand, it's not one-time projects. Meaning, if you work as of today on your data governance to restrict access to sensitive information for the usage of Copilot for your end users, it's not one time. Your data lives, your company lives. So you need to ensure that whatever you're going to do, it becomes a program. So we have tools for that to ensure that if you protect something, you will also protect it in 3 months from now. But we also need to be sure that whenever your business evolves, like for example, a new contract, or you acquired a company and so on, you are able to follow up with this evolution of the company. And this is where it's very strategic. We provide the tools just to ensure we can help the IT to meet the business requirements. And this is a clear focus. We have dashboards, of course, for ITs, but also for people business. I mean, when you have sensitive information shared outside of your business environment, meaning your SharePoint, your Teams, your emails, and so on, you need to understand, or you want to understand who get access to what, when. And such reports are here for that. But when your data evolves, you also need to make it evolve, meaning creating new rules, meaning creating sometimes new exceptions, because you're working now with an external auditor, consultant company, for example. So there is a technical tools, there's also the process and the business. And do not forget about that. When you create your rules on a technical standpoint, please be ensured you're going to ask also the business and top management to be involved. It's very strategic for the success of this project.
I appreciate that. I'm going to move back over to you, Tyler, and ask a follow-up question, more specific to your world. As Hilton rolls out Copilot to new users in Hilton, how do you maintain the level of data and compliance and security that you've worked to achieve on an ongoing basis?
Yeah, I mean, to go off of what Antonio was saying, it's kind of, you got to continue to do the training with the users, make sure that they understand what they're sharing, how to review their sharing, and you have to make sure that they do this on a semi-regular cadence. It's not a one and done thing, because what I shared yesterday, I've already shared 10 more things today. So it's an ongoing training effort. We're working on figuring out how we're going to more or less enforce the attestation going forward. Likely it'll be built into some kind of like security training program that we have to do on an annual basis anyway or something. But yeah, that's the big thing is I don't know what Antonio should share, and Antonio doesn't know necessarily what I should share. So it's really hard for someone outside of the data owner to know who should have access to it. So making sure the data owner understands how to review the access, revoke the access if need be, or the risks associated with different types of sharing. That's the key point on this being successful, is the end users knowing how to do it.
Very good. I appreciate that. I'm going to take a question that came in during the call. Amal, I think I'm going to hit you up with this one because I think it's in your wheelhouse and you have a broader purview of all that's going on. But what industries are you seeing most impacted by Copilot and AI?
It's a very good question, and I would not say that there are specific industries being impacted by Copilot, because we are seeing customers across the wide spectrum of industries that we would have. I've seen customers in manufacturing, energy, telecoms, insurance, financial services, all of them leveraging Copilot. So I would not say it is disrupting specific industries. At the end of the day, Copilot is a tool that is transforming the way you work, and it can impact any user, information worker in any industry equally as any other industry. So I would not put industry. I would say it is industry agnostic, but changing or transforming almost all, or touching upon every industry.
I appreciate that. I'm going to take another question. And Antonio, I'm going to point this one to you because I know you work a lot with record managers.
Okay.
Speak a lot to them. Is the trend to take us, I'm sorry, who is the best served to oversee the usage of Copilot?
That's a great question. You could look at the usage of Copilot a few different ways. My first thought around that is it should be a person that is, I think you need to assign a person to own the Copilot rollout that needs to be responsible for it, that needs to be responsible for the promotion and adoption of Copilot across the organization. I think that's less of a technical role and more of an adoption role. I think you do have to have a person that owns it, that's responsible for it. They need to be communicating on a regular basis with the folks that are using Copilot, like weekly. Like, you need to make some sort of communication or some sort of information about Copilot that's shared on some kind of a weekly basis, like publish a new prompt every week for folks, for example. But I would lean more towards the adoption specialists around Copilot. Now, they need to work with other folks in the organization from a data security and privacy perspective, of course, for all the great reasons that we've said. But in terms of owning the rollout of Copilot, I would lean more towards a, say, modern workplace adoption specialist.
Very good. And last question before we have our closing. And I'm going to push this one to you, Stefan, if you're okay with that. But how can you prove or otherwise guarantee sensitive data used with Copilot is not trained on?
Yeah, that's a real concern for customers. So it's a commitment. So Microsoft has been committed for many years about respecting the ownership of the informations. When you see about the way we have rules around the cloud responsibilities model at Microsoft, you can see that the customers are always responsible for the data. So in a sense, Copilot is the same way. We have our own engine. We do make it learn from our own set of data. And we are not using customers' data for that. So it's a strong commitment. It's public. You can look over the internet for that. It's not only about the technical capabilities and so on, because there would be so much data to ingest. I'm not even sure we have the capability for that. But honestly, it's more about, it's a commitment for Microsoft to respect the ownership of the data. Your data are yours. And it won't change. It won't change. It's part of your tenants, and our learning language model is not working on your tenants and its data.
Very good. And I know
you have more information about that, perhaps about in Copilot.
Very good. And I noticed that was the last one, but I'm going to ask you, and I'm going to be completely unfair to you, Antonio, on this one. I see a lot of questions related to purview and licensing, and nobody can seem to have a conversation around Microsoft without talking about these. But most purview features seem to be available only with E5 licenses. Should E5 be considered a prerequisite for a safe Copilot adoption?
So it's a good question. We often get licensing questions around purview. Many of the purview capabilities are available with E3 licenses. There are a lot of capabilities that are only available with E5 licenses. One of the distinctions between those, and I'm going to generalize greatly here, so Microsoft people don't jump on me for this, but many of the automated features in Purview are what you need the E5 license for, right? Automated records management, automated assignment of sensitivity labels, and so on. Endpoint DLP requires an E5 license, for example. Given the nature of Copilot and running across all of your data, and us feeling this imperative of having to protect our data, which is important. When I think about the amount of data that people are amassing, those automated capabilities are necessary in order to be able to implement data protection controls en masse across all of your data. So although E3 is not required for Copilot, my personal opinion is that, E5, although E5 is not required for Copilot, my personal opinion is that to implement data protection controls from Purview effectively across a large amount of content, E5 really is necessary to do that in an effective way. It's just those automated capabilities, there's so much benefit from it. Endpoint DLP, IRM, the E5 license gives you so much benefit within Purview and protecting your data across a large corpus of content that I would say, yes, E5 should be considered a baseline level of protection for Copilot.
I appreciate that, even though I put you on the spot. There are a lot more questions. We're not going to get to all the questions. We can respond to the questions post the event. I do want to do a wrap-up question to each one of you. Same question, but hear from every one of you in a really quick response on, based on the conversation today, what's one thing you would want people to take away when preparing for and using Microsoft Copilot? I'm going to start with you, Tyler.
I would say the biggest thing, based off of our experience as well as talking with other companies that have rolled out Copilot, is the biggest concern that people have are with the org sharing links. And the biggest takeaway from that is org sharing links do not actually grant access to the content. Clicking the link does. So just because you have org sharing links out there doesn't necessarily mean that the data is going to come back with Copilot or any kind of other search. That is the biggest takeaway based off of everything I've talked about with other customers that are also doing Copilot.
Good, I appreciate that. Aman, same question to you.
Well, we have talked a lot about security and compliance, so I'm not going to talk about security and compliance. I think folks understand here the importance of it. I'm going to leave with two other takeaways. The first one is, of course, this technology, Gen AI, Copilot. It's transforming. It's a new era of transformation. It's not digital transformation. We call it AI-led transformation or AI transformation that is coming into the organizations. So it is important for these transformations to be successful, to have leadership level buy-in and execution and support in any organization. We are seeing this where we have leadership buy-in, executive sponsorship. Copilot projects are being very successful versus, where organizations do not have it. So my first takeaway is, please, if you have executives here in the audience, ensure that you have the sponsorship and you sponsor your Copilot programs, and users understand the importance of Copilot and how it can transform the way they work. The second one, which I've already mentioned, I think in the call here, is the importance of change management. Do not underplay the importance of change management. It is changing. It is happening with us within Microsoft as well. The way we are interacting with technology, how we are leveraging, for example, the notes coming out of meetings, and we focus more on meetings and less on taking notes. It is changing the way people use technology. And so adoption and change management is extremely important to ensure these projects are successful, and an ongoing sort of enforcement of change management on an ongoing basis, because it is not the end of transformation. Copilot AI is only going to evolve and get better over time. So this will require an ongoing change management within the organization. And of course, then people will make use of this and change the way they work every day. That's all.
A very thoughtful response. Stefan, 1 minute for you on the same question.
Okay, trying to go fast to ensure Antonio has time for that also. So I'm more focused on security and compliance, of course, but we can discuss for that a lot of time. I think customers and specifically program managers need to understand it's not a trend. It's going to stay, meaning customers and users will be using more and more Gen AI. So you just need to facilitate the usage of it, but also control it the way it's going to be used. And also, do not forget, the only one needing these Gen AI capabilities like Copilot, it's a business. It's not a new feature for the IT or a new gadget or something like that, something you're going to buy and put it somewhere. And that's it. It's going to stay, it's going to evolve, it's going to be used by the business. So keep the focus on the end users.
Very good. Antonio?
And just really quick, my final point would be strive to achieve a balance between data security and preparing for Copilot, and then actually rolling out and getting benefits from AI. It's really easy to do an assessment of your environment and think, we have spent a lot of time cleaning this up before we can roll out any Copilot solution, and that just delays you getting benefits or your users getting benefits from AI. So try to strike a balance between how much we really need to clean up and prepare for and actually getting it in people's hands.
Very good. I appreciate you all and your thoughtful responses. Thank you all for joining us. Mackenzie, over to you.
Yes, thank you, everybody. Thanks for all the audience and for submitting so many great questions. And big thank you to all of our panelists. We appreciate all of your time. As a reminder, everybody's going to get the on-demand recording of this as well as some additional resources. And with that, happy holidays. We hope to see you in some of our webinars next year. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good one.